What's up, everyone? This is Mike Burgener, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I interviewed the supple leopard, Kelly Starrett. We talk about his new book. We talk about mobility, leadership, parenting. This guy is just a guru and an all-around great human being, so you have a ton to learn in this show. If you're interested in getting leaner, getting stronger, building lean muscle mass, check out our program, Brute Body. We just launched it again today. And if you're interested, we have an exclusive offer just for you, just for people that listen to the podcast. If you enter code PODCASTBOD, that's PODCASTBOD, PODCASTBOD at checkout, you can get $100 off your first month of the program. That's $100 off. That's the biggest discount we are giving to anyone, and that's only for people that listen to the podcast. So go to brutestrengthtraining.com/brute-body. That's brutestrengthtraining.com/brute-body to check out the programs and enter code PODCASTBOD at checkout. Enjoy the show. All right, what's up, everyone? I'm here with Kelly Starrett. Kelly, how are you, man?
I'm so good.
Thank you for making some time to do this. I know you're super busy. I'm sure you got a book tour. Who knows what else you got going on. So I appreciate you making some time to answer some questions and chat with me today.
My pleasure. If we're talking about picking up heavy weights, I mean, you've got me. You had me at hello.
So what does a day in the life of Kelly Starrett look like? We used to see you every single day on MobilityWOD. Now you've got 15 different projects going on. What does a day usually look like for you?
Well, let me correct you by saying I'm still on MWOD every day.
Okay.
We still program a 10 or 15 minute intervention, a session every day, and that's, I think, not to skirt your question, but what we're seeing is, everyone who's out there working as a coach eventually realizes that your core practice is the thing that you do. If you're an athlete or a coach, you can play around with other things, but it always comes back to running and carrying things and picking up heavy weights and coaching people. And that, I think sometimes people really end up losing themselves a little bit. They're trying to figure out how to commoditize their businesses. They're trying to, you get sucked into a different relationship with a company or a different, collab with another business, but you can never take your eye off of your practice. And that practice is, the core of what I do is I coach. I'm a physio. I train and practice, I think, and then the whole ecosystem around us actually, kind of supports that, in so much that, my friends are coaches and weightlifters or athletes, or in strength conditioning. My hobbies are there, and it ends up being this kind of weird thing where there's sort of no edge to where I am professionally. My wife and I, we love to train, we love to compete, we train together. And so suddenly even that aspect of ourselves is sort of integrated with what we do professionally. It's a great place to be.
Absolutely, man. So Kelly, you're a leader of this quickly growing fitness community. You're one of many leaders. You have several books, a very successful gym, PT practice, etc. A lot of people would never really dare to think this big. Where does all your confidence come from? What do you attribute it to?
Well, I think if let me give you a metaphor. There's a couple physios in the UK who literally just kind of became strength and conditioning, United States strength and conditioning conscious, right? That people have their heads down, and then they suddenly look at the United States, where there's so much good innovation in strength and conditioning right now. It's really remarkable what's happening, and all of a sudden, you see any one person, take any one of our friends, Mark Bell, and you look at Mark Bell and what he's doing, and you're like, holy crap, did he just get there overnight? How do you make those leaps? And what you didn't see was the 500 videos that he and Jim videoed sessions, where they took these little incremental steps, where they built practice, systems developed, they found their voice, they developed their practice. It's like, I think it's like watching anyone, squat 1,000 pounds. You're like, I can never squat 1,000 pounds. Where you're like, well, that guy never really started squatting 1,000 pounds. You just can't see the 15,000 sets before. And I think a little bit of that has happened with us, where when we started this thing, honestly, YouTube was brand new. Mm-hmm. And the other phenomenon that was interesting was that, the only kind of blogging platform was Blogger. And the real innovation came when I didn't have to, download something from a camera to the computer and spend another hour uploading it, when we could upload directly from the phone.
Right.
So we could go from, like when we started, one of the things that I think we were able to capture on, for example, is that YouTube really made it easy for people to consume content that wasn't super highly produced, which means that, like, if I was hanging out with Donnie Thompson, I could make a video on the spot about something with Donnie Thompson, and it wasn't a huge deal, and we didn't have a big camera crew, and that's not to say that there isn't certainly a place. If we use Matt Vincent again, his Drift to Lifter series are so good and so produced, and Matt's such a ninja on the camera. But when we're developing or delivering sort of less entertainment and more information content, mm-hmm. people are comfortable sort of seeing the ragged edges. It doesn't have to be as sort of as polished. And so we came about, when we started this project, 7 years ago, making just a video a day, seeing if we could just help solve some problems. That's all we've continued to do, is just continue to say, hey, look, there's a problem that we can solve. Let's try to solve it. And then we're living in a technological time where, we can Skype, mm-hmm. and I can talk to other coaches, and, I have literally, the Twitter conversations we're able to have with friends. And it's been a remarkable amalgamation of all this technology and just small, steps. And really the most important step was, for years and years and years, I was at the gym a lot. And coached a lot. And that really is the heart and soul of the practice. And then we had a little bit extra time and we made a video, or we started teaching a course, and then practice begets practice. And so then, it's not that you end up, setting out. I think if you literally set out to create an empire, I think you're going to fall on your face. I think you just do one thing really well, and then pretty soon you can do two things well.
Right. I think it's interesting too. You're talking about these different forms of content and how much they're produced, depending on the audience. And I think, our community is one of these audiences that almost appreciates the more authentic approach. So when you're sending a video from your iPhone, they feel like they're hanging out with Kelly Starrett every day. Whereas if there's something highly produced and you're, there's a lot of edits, and it's, in 4K, they feel more far removed from you. So it's almost a better way to build a tribe. I mean, you look at Snapchat has the highest engagement, I think, of any social media, and it's got the least amount you can do with it, right?
That's right. And, it's not that our cameras haven't, we have the YouTube channel, which is just old content. And then, but if you look at we have nice cameras on MobilityWOD now, mm-hmm. right? But your point is, that people, I think, have really high bullshit detectors these days.
Right.
And I think we see more, bullshit gadgetry, gimmickry in fitness, but in strength and conditioning, I mean, it's honest, and I mean, it's epitomized by, like, just go to Westside, train in the dirtiest, sketchiest gym in the whole world with Louie, and there's no place to hide, and there's no distraction, and it's the real deal. And, I think one of the things that we've always really tried to do, because we think that people are smarter than they're given credit for, and way more sophisticated than people give them credit for. And that, we try to break the third wall. We try to include people in the conversation and try to be resources and allies for people. And I think, our fundamental conversation has always been, people will make better decisions if you give them better tools, And when we really made a conscious shift or started with intention that, hey, we can talk up to people because they're a lot more sophisticated than we've been giving them credit for, then we can really make some significant change. And I'll tell you what's happening right now in strength and conditioning, I think is really exciting. I come from, a pretty good strength and conditioning background, but I also come from this physio background. And what I can tell you is that the physio sports medicine world is getting its ass kicked by the smart strength and conditioning coaches. And all I have to do is point you in the direction of someone like Chris Duffin, who probably can handle 99% of the musculoskeletal problems better than a physio can, because he's a smart person who understands mechanics, right? He's a user and a tinkerer, and he's not dealing necessarily with injury. He refers out if he's injured. But there's this mid-level of dysfunction where we have incomplete mechanics and incident-level problems. And then let me define that for you. An incident-level problem is one where you like deadlift and your back hurts the next day, right? Or you're pressing and your shoulder hurts or wrist hurts. You're not injured, but something hurts or something's not working right. And what I can tell you is that as a community, we're becoming much more attuned with understanding the nuances of position and really remedying that. And we're moving beyond, just get stronger. There was a time where we just, we thought that being, well-conditioned or just being brutally strong solved all the problems. And we realize now it doesn't. And what the revolution that's happening is that the strength and conditioning coaches out there they're touching people 3 to 5 times a week, and they're the guys who are, men and women who are able to identify the missing ankle restriction, right? The ankle restriction of the missing range of motion in the hip, and being able to fix it on the spot because they can see it in the context of the movements they're doing for the day. And that revolution that's happening is really, really profound.
Right. Well, it's interesting. Do you think this has anything to do with the strength and conditioning coach for a lot of athletes is completely free to go to, right? Or at best, they're say $150 an hour, where you have a physio might be double or triple that amount. Do you think that has something to do with, like, they're getting extra repetitions with those coaches versus the physios?
Well, I think it's we have to look at, where people are spending their most time and who's actually delivering the movement information. And I think the problem with sports medicine is it's in a completely different language. You come in with knee pain, right? Did that person watch you clean? Did they watch you deadlift? Did they talk about your shoes or your heel strike?
Right.
The problem is we're sort of misusing, the medical system. We're using it to say, hey, I'm having this performance-related issue, right, or a movement-related issue, and you're in here talking, suddenly I have a bunch of exercises that don't look the same, are in a different language, don't even work. They work for really detrained people, mm-hmm. and really, really weak people, right, and people who basically are in chronic pain. I'm not saying that's not valid in that, but it's not scalable, and it doesn't even translate or port over to strength and conditioning. So what you're left with is a generation of athletes, tens of thousands of athletes, right, who are out in the world seeking and searching for a better solution for themselves. And what's happened is, we've really seen this emergent language of strength and conditioning come out where, sports medicine can't even identify, like, what is a good squat and what's a bad squat. They can't identify, they don't even think that, like, hip hinging, deadlifting, hip hinging is like a valuable or a requisite human function. And I think if those people aren't going to speak the language, and imagine, you're a big, strong guy, and you come in and you just get this really low level thing, or interventions that work for a 90-pound runner, but they don't work for a 240-pound powerlifter. So what do? You end up rejecting the entire thing out of hand. And what we're seeing is the strength and conditioning coach or the fitness teacher, that person is seeing you and has a history with you and understands, the context of you, and they see you, 3 to 5 times a week? If you come and train with Diane Fu at our gym, right? Like, she's been watching you lift for a year. She knows how you lift, what's going on, and she's just much better at identifying the movement restriction and fixing it. And look, if you've got, squat cancer, then you eventually you're gonna have to go see someone, or if you've been hit by a car, Western medicine is a miracle, but 50% of the problems a physician will see are musculoskeletal in nature. And right now, the sports medicine world doesn't even recognize that position is a function of dysfunction. They won't even make the case because there's no research to point out that, that collapsed arch and valgus knee twitch is the reason your knee hurts when you're heavy front squat.
Mm-hmm. So first off, I couldn't agree more. And actually, when I was a strength and conditioning coach at LSU, I made a packet for one of the teams, very based on your Supple Leopard book and things I had learned, through just watching your videos. So, as a strength and conditioning coach myself, like that is more my inclination to try to help people with that type of thing. When do you think strength and conditioning coaches take it too far? Some people, the majority of their workouts are these correctives, and there's quote unquote correctives. Just take that.
Well, I think the problem is, that we need to identify what's going to happen, and one is that we can still always get some work done, and we're going to train today no matter what. We may have to, slow some things down. We may have to regress, right, some patterns. But what you can do is you can look at, corrective exercise as what I call skill transfer exercise, right? It's like doing RDLs after squatting. You know what I mean? It's like what we're trying to do is groove a pattern, right? Get things to turn back on. But you can never confuse that with the actual thing. And the actual thing is benching, squatting, deadlifting, pushing, pulling, swing. I mean, it's, do not ever confuse that, right? We're still going to get some work done. The mobility, and let me define that, mobilization, right? I call position transfer exercises. And, all we're ever asking and telling people, and Chris Duff and I just made a video about this, but like, it's a 10-minute process. Get some work done. But, most of the errors we see in people is that, they don't have full range of motion. If you can't put your arms up over your head, what do you think is going to happen when we press today over your head? So at some point we're going to have a conversation about incomplete position. But when people have a complete position, because let me give you another example. A long time ago, I would go down and I'd get work from Mike Burgener. He was my Olympic lifting sensei, right? And he literally I was a young physio student. This was 12 years ago, 11 years ago, and I'd fly down and work his course for him. I just, for 3 days or 2 days, I'd get to just be in the same room as this master Olympic lifting coach, and I just, I'd get to suck up and watch him coach. I get to suck up all his teaching. And one of the things that I remember seeing early on was that he'd be working on a snatch or something or a clean jerk, and he had 10,000 skill transfer exercises. He'd be like, "Oh, you're not turning over. We're going to do these 3 drills, and then go back to the drill," right? And I remember thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to accumulate these 10,000 drills that he knows. I mean, he's just known everyone, right, and seen it all. I'm like, how am I ever going to, be able to replicate that or understand that? And of course, there's no substitution for coaching for 10 years. I mean, that really does make a difference. But the other aspect of that is I started to see that, hey, if you're missing internal rotation of your shoulder, then your hang position, that high hang is going to be compromised no matter what. And if you go from a compensated high hang position, then your lockout is going to be crap no matter what. Your receiving position, your snatch is going to be crap. And what I realized is that, hey, a lot of times we can pull way back on corrective exercise if the body is just able to do what it needs to do, right? And so, if you have full range of motion in your hip, then it's a lot easier for me to, my programming becomes even more simple. And that assistance exercise is just that. It's assistance exercise. We're just doing dips,
right,
after bench day, because that makes your bench go up, and and that trains that position well. So, I think what we've seen is definitely a turn where people have. Think of this. It's a new technology. Suddenly, you can go deep down the corrective exercise loophole, and you have these position transfer exercises, which we'll call mobilizations. And all of a sudden, you're like, "Whoa, this is a new toy. How do I employ this?" And just like when you first got your safety front squat bar, your safety squat bar. I mean, you squatted with it a lot, and you probably used it too much, and if that's even possible. But, you get the idea here that, some of it is people need to just not ever forget why we're in the gym, and that's to become brutally strong, brutally fast, and brutally well-conditioned.
I love that. How would you describe your style of leadership?
Well, I'll tell you what, my wife and I really strive to create an environment where, people can find their voice and develop a business, right? We very much see our gym as an incubator of really great coaches. Like Kristen Newman is a national medalist, Olympic lifter. She took a couple years ago, before she had a bad motorcycle injury, she was second in the World's Strongest Man at the Arnold. And now she's the head coach of the new Alico training facility in the East Bay. And what we're trying to do is give confidence and experience and voice to really extraordinary coaches so they can, develop themselves. Where our model doesn't work very well is if you're not sort of driven, we're not looking for necessarily perfect little employees, who just, little workers. We're looking for smart, turned-on people who are obsessed, who are working towards, finding their own voice. And what I'll say is, we don't want to manage people on the day-to-day. That sounds, like we'd open a frozen yogurt shop and hire high school kids if that was what we wanted to do. What we're really looking for is looking for people we want to work with, right? And that's just a better conversation and not a management style. And I think what's really nice is we try to lead by example, which is easier said than done, of course. That means we practice. We do the things we say we're going to do. We answer emails on time. If we say we're going to be somewhere, we're there, and we try to be really consistent. We have a friend in the world named Jocko Willink, and he wrote a great book called Extreme Ownership, and I think his model of extreme ownership, on the surface it sounds raw and tough, but it's really about being egoless and in a constant sort of state of realizing that any problem that is there is your making. And that means you either you haven't set someone up for success, right? You haven't empowered them with the tools to make better decisions, right? So, and it may mean that it's their failing, but it's your failure to not give them what they needed or identify that person was not a good part of the team. And that egolessness really does help get out of the way of real progress, and it's one of the things that I think is we're fortunate, is that we've had some success, but we're also, Juliet and I came to this world. She was an attorney, I was a physio. We were both a little bit older, and we're not threatened by rock stars and superstars. So we can collab and hang out with really, really smart, talented people who are smarter and more talented than we are, and that doesn't intimidate us. That makes us pretty fired up.
That's awesome. And that book that Jocko wrote, that's Extreme Ownership, correct?
That's Extreme Ownership. I really think everyone should read that because it will help you understand that, like, if you have a superstar lieutenant, someone who works for you, like they're a diamond in your hat,
right.
It's tricky. I think, the strength and conditioning and gym membership, ownership, I mean, it has all the trappings of all the testosterone-driven, machismo, but it's a business. And one of the things that I think has been really interesting out of, the CrossFit world is we are seeing more women involved in strength and conditioning now as coaches, not just fitnessing, and I put fitnessing in quotation marks. You're not leading a yoga class or a spin class. I go to these university meetings and university strength and conditioning seminars, and sometimes there's only a single woman out of 100 people in the room. And I mean, how many women were on staff at LSU?
In our room, 0. On the Olympic side, there were 3, 4.
Yeah, and sometimes, that's actually really high. I don't think San Jose State has a single woman on its strength and conditioning staff right now.
Right.
And what we're seeing is, creating that diversity and, is that a team that can see everything. And, I think that just the gym has traditionally been a little bit stuck in the past. But if you go down to Shannon Turley's gym at Stanford, he has a ton of really badass women on the strength and conditioning staff, and now you're starting to create an environment that is really how things get done. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you end up blinding yourself to ways of teaching and ways of communicating. And ultimately, let's be honest, strength and conditioning is really just about teaching. I mean, but we don't sort of arrive there in the same pathway that teachers arrive. Hey, I want to teach. It just happens that I teach squatting. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing again is the maturation of the field where people are learning the motor control, or the motor learning theory. That they have to get better at communicating. We have to continue to develop ourselves. I mean, I don't think you ever arrive as a coach. I think you just continue to progress and evolve. I mean, forever. It's pretty amazing.
Like a master of anything, right? That one of the characteristics of a master is they never stop learning. And you really end up becoming curious. One of the nice things about being a strength coach is that ultimately you're no longer responsible for just playing a sport or having to be just strong to compete. That means you can only squat once or twice a week, right? Right.
And you can become interested in something else. Here's a good example of Diane Fu at our gym, Fu Barbell. She and Pat Griffin, who run our Olympic lifting program, they just went to China and worked with Coach Wu for 2 weeks at their national development program there. And what's interesting is she came back and was like, you know what, those guys, all those immaculate runners, are all doing a bunch of conditioning beforehand. All of the athletes run a mile or so before they go lift, right?
Okay.
And it's so technically driven, and they do so much empty barbell work, way more empty barbell work than anyone in the United States does. And it's very technical. It's not a coach standing in the back room being like, all right, 80% now.
Yep.
I mean, they're hands-on. Every drill is technical drill. And then afterwards, they unwind the nervous system. So they play a game. So the kids go out and play soccer. They do some calisthenics. They just unwind a little bit, and then everyone walks on each other and mashes each other. And so I think that what ends up happening is Diane came back and was like, oh, our athletes can be a lot better conditioned.
Right.
And so you keep putting, refining your skills and becoming curious, and that's the same curiosity that got you there in the first place. But as soon as you start to just live off of the spreadsheet, well, this is what we did back in Nam, and it worked when we won the national championship in '79.
Yep.
And today, it says we're at 82.5% today. I mean, I think that's going away. Thank goodness.
There were some good coaches back in Nam. They don't get enough credit.
Oh, that's exactly true. And I mean, I don't remember where I was. I was in the deep south somewhere, and there was some grizzly old strength coach who was badass, and he was like, I like bench press. It ties the arms to the body. And I was like, excuse me, coach, I'm not sure what that means, And he was right. He understood that if you could break the bar, then you tackle with your elbows in and your thumbs up. He understood that kids who benched technically well had fewer shoulder problems than kids who did not bench well.
Right. All right, let's move on to a little bit about your book. So that you go over a million different things in there. Which
book you talk about?
Oh, that's a good question. Standing Up to a Sitting World. Is that the correct name?
It's Deskbound. Oh, you're talking about Deskbound. Yes.
Yeah, correct. So what are the key pieces that, and I'm talking about prescription, that you want people to take away from that book? Let's assume that either people have read the book or they're gonna go read it right now. What are the things you want them to take away and specifically go and do and change in their life?
Well, first of all, if you're talking to a pretty serious strength and conditioning community, right? And what people should understand is that we wrote this book from the view of people who taught and were in a strength and conditioning system. So what that means is, a long time ago, I was consulting with a big Division I school, and their football players were having a set of problems they couldn't sort of unwrap. Right, and I'll elaborate a little bit more about that in a second. But what I can tell you is that I had them look at the environmental load on their athletes, and that meant, I was like, I want you to track how much sitting. And this was like 8 years ago. I said, track how much sitting your athletes are doing. And those athletes were sitting like 12, 14 hours a day. By the time we put in all the Xbox and all the meetings and all the class and sitting down eating pizza, the athletes were really only up for practice. Otherwise they'd walk to practice, sit, practice, sit. And that what we were seeing was that their bodies were spending time in these, rounded hunchback shapes, bellies turned off, short hips, right? And that was causing a whole bunch of performance-related issues. And, when you look at, we came from the orthopedic mechanics background. We were seeing just sort of a disaster, even in our own children, in our local elementary school. We were seeing, here's another example. When we were working on the book Ready to Run, our daughter, when we started, our daughter was in the first grade. And one of the things I noticed is that all the kindergartners run exactly the same way. They all run like track athletes at LSU. I mean, like, it looks like they have spikes on, they lean, they pull. I mean, they're all little sprinters. It's pretty amazing. Then halfway through the first grade, half the kids start heel striking. And like, that is a fundamentally broken movement pattern, and one that suddenly changes from about 7 or 8. All of a sudden kids are moving radically differently than they've moved for 7 or 8 years. And you have to ask, what is going on? And what was going on was that kids are growing and sitting. And that combination of, sort of not expressing normal range of motion regularly and this aberrant sort of environmental load was causing them to fundamentally shift how they moved and who they were as humans, which is a disaster. And so, we got interested in this thing. And the reason people listening to this podcast should be interested, because they're probably like, I'm fit. Well, it turns out there's a couple things that when the Harvard identifies a sedentary lifestyle as sitting more than 6 hours a day. And I'll be honest, it is easy to aggregate 6 hours a day. And we can be a little bit more granular about that. The definition of sedentary position is burning less than 1.5 metabolic equivalents. And what we're seeing is when you sit down, basically enough musculature shuts off, and things happen in your brain around the positions, and that really is a fundamental assault to your physiology. When we started, the first ever MWOD video was a 10-minute squat test, right? And if you ask people to squat all the way down without Olympic lifting shoes and without like knee compression straps and keep your heel on the ground, what you're seeing is people can't even do that. They don't have full hip range of motion. They don't have full ankle range of motion. And so I'm like, well, no wonder you have to turn your feet out when you squat. But by the way, that's not the way you cut. That's not the way we teach jumping and landing mechanics. That's not how you line up at the batting cage. That's not how you line up a putt, right? Your feet are straight in all those activities. And so suddenly we're the only way we can squat is to turn our feet out. And so we end up training kind of separate patterns, right? So I'm like, so I should turn all the kids out to 30 degrees or 20 degrees. So, but if they're going to dunk, they should be straight. So they should know what they're going to do before they do it, so they can adjust their feet. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And what does make sense is, hey, people are squatting in the only position they can move in as a function of their limited restriction. And we started seeing sort of, the implications of the sitting thing. And really what we ended up doing was saying, hey, look, if you're a strength and conditioning athlete, you're probably looking at your sleep, and you're probably looking at your nutrition. And all we're asking you to do is go ahead and look at the rest of your, what we're going to call environmental hygiene, and say that, human beings are designed to be moving. When you sit down, for example, one of the things that happens is that your musculature shuts off in your lower body. Like, you can actually measure spikes in blood glucose when people sit down because your legs stop burning glucose because they're not being active, right? So your blood glucose will elevate a little bit. Well, and it turns out that, if you've trained really hard and you sit down, one of the things that's happening is you're no longer developing muscle contraction like we talked about, but it's that muscle contraction that literally squeezes and dumps your lymphatic system. And it's your lymphatic system that circulates your immune system, that clears congestion and fluid from your tissues, right? After that training, you're like sort of swollen it up. And what we're doing is we're making a bunch of adaptation errors around our environment. We're not walking enough, we're not doing enough conditioning, and we're not moving enough during the day. And that's a huge deal.
So in your book, you say get up every, I think it was 30 minutes for about and move for 2 minutes. Is that correct?
Well, that's a good, if you're forced to sit, and there are plenty of us who have to sit. If you're in a class and you can't stand up in the back of the class, you're in a board meeting, you can't be the only person at the board meeting, who's standing, and the first thing we want you to do is to divide your life into optional and non-optional sitting. And when you're in the car, let's be honest, it's hard to stand up, right?
Right.
So you're like, well, what I'm going to do? Quit my job, Kelly? This is dumb. And so instead, what we're saying is, hey, look, try to eliminate the non-optional sitting, or the optional sitting. So get rid of that. Sit on the floor, try to move around. Get a stand. You don't need a $5,000 standing desk. You need a Amazon box.
Right.
And so the idea here is, let's get you being more human first, and then when you find situations where you have to sit, make sure that you're getting up every once in a while, squeezing your butt, flexing your quads, putting your arms over your head. And what you're going to see is the entire system upregulates. We see better breathing function, better pelvic floor function. Your jaw goes into a better position. It's easier to put your arms over your head. Just choose something that matters to you. You want to burn more calories? Like a lot of people get involved in strength and conditioning and fitness because they want to change their body composition. Like, if we're being totally honest, there are some of us that care how much we deadlift, and we don't care how much we look like, but there's a lot of people who care about what they look like, including those of us who want to deadlift heavy, right?
Right.
But the idea here is that, if you stand, for example, we'll take my wife. Juliet is a 2-time world champion. She's a rower at Cal. Right, she's my training partner. She trains really hard. She's a long distance endurance paddler. Right, she probably trains 5 or 6 days a week. When she stands up instead of sitting down, she burns an additional 100,000 calories a year.
No shit.
Do you know how much ice cream that represents to me at 238 pounds? And if I don't just sit down and work, I burn like 200,000 more calories a year. It's insane.
That's a lot of Ben & Jerry's.
Dude, that's my point, is that I'm telling you, you can have an extra cheat day. All you need to do is stand up while you check your email. And what we're seeing is, I think we're leaving a lot of low-hanging fruit on the table, and we're solving a lot of mechanical restriction problems that don't need to be solved.
Right.
And I think that's what we're really trying to do with the book, is saying, hey, look, it's a lot easier not to move like crap, and it's a lot easier to move better if you just don't sit all the time.
Right. It's interesting. It's not sexy at all, this idea that you're selling. And it's almost the kind of thing where people just need to try it out for a few days, and it works for everyone. Like I started working, standing up, going to coffee shops and standing up at a bar or standing up at tall tables and stuff like that. I am like on fire when I'm standing up. Like, my mind just seems to work better. I have higher energy. My hips don't hurt. And it's the kind of thing where I think anyone that tries it is going to see the benefit immediately. It's just getting them to actually try it.
Yeah. And some of it is, it's just habit. Remember, people are smart, and we all come from somewhere. And if you've come from an environment where that's what you did, you literally walk into a room and look for the chair. Right, that's a behavioral change, and what you pointed out was what all of the emerging research is supporting. I mean, a big piece of research was just published that at a call center, which means that they called and sold something, that they did 47% more business when people stood, which made only a small difference of $80 million to that little company.
Jesus.
And when the researchers, Dr. Mark Bendon out of Texas A&M, really begged them to, hey, can we publish this? And they were like, you can publish this, but you can't use our name because it's such a competitive advantage over our competitors. And that's really what we're seeing, is that the brain functions better, right? Your attention is better. I mean, kids get like 200 points better on the SAT when they stand.
Wow.
It's a fundamental shift, and I'll tell you, it seems like a really radical idea until you start to thinking, what is the human being supposed to do? We're supposed to eat food, like real food, right? 6 to 8 fistfuls of vegetables a day. We're supposed to, pick up heavy things and squat down and work on the ground, and we got to sleep. 7 hours is our drop dead minimum sleep. And you can't train like a maniac and get by in 7 hours of sleep. You can't. You cannot. You will break down. you're going to need more sleep than that, And so there are some fundamental positions and things about the human being that we cannot compromise on. And one of them is moving more during the day. And so, when you start to move, and now the research is again really supporting that we're seeing, massive changes in outcomes and behavior. Here's a good example. I mean, you're a boy, I'm a boy. Right now, boys are getting their butts kicked in every academic standard you can think of. Going to graduate school, graduation from professional schools, SAT, math. I mean, it's all about girls right now kicking boys' ass. And in fact, there's a book out there called Raising Cain, which looks at this educational divide between boys and girls. And it turns out that one of the reasons boys are getting their asses kicked is that they have a higher genetic drive to move than girls. And so they squirm in the chair. They have this negative association at school because it doesn't feel good, and then they get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And so literally you can look at any of this. And now our daughters are at the first all-standing school in the world. Some of those kids have been standing for 2 full years. And this year, we just wrapped up school yesterday, and we have 500 kids at standing moving desks. And guess what? There's no complaints. Everyone does better. We have families who have kids with ADD, ADHD who come up to us and say, hey, my kids can focus better. We have anecdotal stories of families where boys were ended up in the principal's office 2 or 3 times a week, and those are gone. Why? Because they can just move. It's crazy.
That's amazing. Amazing. I have a quote from your book. It is, passive stretching is like trying to push start your car without putting the key in the ignition, applying tension and slight movement at end range to help facilitate change and restore tissue function. What do you mean by this?
Well, what we do is, hey, I'm stiff. I'm missing a range of motion, right? So let me just pull on the thing. And what you do is you feel tension in the system, right? You're like, oh, I feel tension. I must be stretching. Well, we always want to point out that, flexibility is a property that describes a rubber hose, right? And your joints, your musculature shouldn't be flexible. Your musculature is a neuromuscular system that's an active system. It can definitely be stiff, but just pulling on it is what it's designed to resist. It's designed to be pulled on, right? So just pulling on it passively doesn't get it. What we're trying to show is that when you're trying to make neuromuscular changes in adaptively short musculature, and remember, if I have douchey shoulders, my shoulders, good shoulder position when your hands are by your side, your front of your shoulders should not be in front of your nipples. That's a mistake, right? But if I screw your shoulders into the sockets, get into the good anatomical position, like I'm setting up a bench, right? Well, it turns out I didn't stretch your shoulders, or stretch your pecs. I just put your pecs, reset their normal resting length relationship. And so what we're seeing is that passive stretching, just yanking on insertions, right, is not a recipe for motor control. It's not a recipe for improved function. It just doesn't work. I mean, it feels like you're definitely pulling on something, but it doesn't make the changes we're after. You've got to get your brain involved, and that's why systems like PNF really work well when we're trying to make changes in neuromuscular systems. Otherwise, it could be capsular, it could be sliding surfaces, but you just quit just hanging out at end range. If you took a football team and made them work on the splits passively, you would see more hip pulls and pointers and groin tears than ever you had before.
Wow. So I can't remember the exact context of this, but basically you would rather see, I guess what you would call flossing, right? So if someone's working on themselves, we can't always find a way to do PNF on ourselves, right? So what is the correct way to go about stretching?
Well, in the books, we and on the site, there's a couple things. Is that one is let's understand what we're trying to do, and that is let's restore full position. So at least we have identified what we think is full position, which is makes sense physiologically, right? We can go from American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, we can go to Norkin and White, we can do any of the joint range goniometry books, and we can say, okay, this is what we all agree is normal range of motion of the shoulder. What does that look like in the gym? Well, it means that you should be able to hold 2 dumbbells over your head like hammers with your elbows straight, right, without flaring your rib cage. And that's normal range of motion in your shoulders. And if you don't have that, it's not that you're a bad person. You just have incomplete range of motion in your shoulders. So if we're going to go fix that position, then we have to start taking a more of a systems approach. Is this just a joint capsule limitation? Is this musculature that's limiting this overhead position? Or is that the whole system is just so stiff that the tissues don't slide over one another, right? And what we're trying to do is sort of systematically work through that process so that we can restore that range of motion. And if it happens to be a muscular restriction, then we can either address the trigger points by contracting into a ball and releasing, or we can do some kind of end range, hold, contract, release sort of model to try to address that. Otherwise, it's, we need to do some instrumented scraping with a scraping tool. We need to, smash on a barbell. We need to, have someone walk on us. We need to do some, ART-like things, some tack and floss, or we need to address the joint capsule with some distraction. And when you start to realize that, hey, I can put in 10 minutes, I can choose one or two of these things working towards improving a position, then I can make radical change in the system.
Right. You use the word distraction a lot. The way I understand that is like the tractioning of a joint. Is that correct?
Yeah. If there's sort of a couple ways to make changes in the joint capsule. And one of those things is we're trying to either pull the distraction concept is that, hey, look, if I grab a band, wind my shoulder up into a stable position, and then pull, so I'm grabbing a band, trying to go overhead, palm up. One of the easiest and oldest osteopathic techniques to restore motion is to try to take the joint surfaces into a stable position and then try to pull the surfaces apart. And that's an easy it's called long distraction. But what we know is that, I can use a band to try to guide the hip or guide the joint into a better position. And that allows me to apply the specific force to the position. Because if you bring your knee to your chest, laying on your ground, you're going to feel tension in your hamstrings long before you feel tension in your joint capsule of the hip. Why? Because that joint capsule is thick and fibrous, and the hamstrings aren't going to behave in the same way. And so you're always going to feel a bigger load in the hamstrings than you do in the joint capsule. But when you add a band, you can actually make changes in the tissues that need to be made change.
Got it. And most people don't know that you can stretch someone and provide that traction for them or that distraction.
Oh, totally. And more importantly, you can do it yourself. And I think that's what we need to understand is that, you can probably do 90% of the things yourself and to good effect, and I think that's really disruptive and makes people uncomfortable. But, what we've done is we've removed people's responsibility and their intelligence. We don't think that they're smart enough to roll on their quads without hurting themselves. And that's a bunch of bullshit.
Right.
Look, if you go see your doctor because you have knee pain, and it turns out that you can't even extend your leg, you haven't even tried to fix that, and your quads are stiff, and your calf is tight, and your suprapatellar pouch is all glued down, shame on you. You're doing your physician a disservice. Those are things that everyone should be able to do.
Absolutely.
You get into the couch position, couch stretch, and you can't even breathe, and I'm like, that's the problem. Fix that first. So take all the crap off, and then it turns out you may have a weasel living in your kneecap. That's possible, but it's unlikely.
Gotcha. For coaches that want to become, or coaches, practitioners, whatever it may be, that want to become a master, and I'm going to call you a master, you might not call yourself that. What is the order of operations and most important things for them to keep in mind on this long road? And I know you kind of touched on it earlier talking about business, but take that how you will. Well,
mastery is about daily practice, and first and foremost, it's about your own practice. Are you lifting and training? A lot of times when people become strength and conditioning coaches, their own practice goes out the window. They stop learning, they stop experiencing. It's really important that your athletes see you train. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to push the biggest weights, you don't have to be the strongest person in the gym. Chances are you are, but you don't have to be. But you need to keep training. The other thing is that you need to go train with other people and learn from other people. Right now, it's a good time because it's easy to find these really excellent people. And then you just need to coach and coach and coach and coach And that process will develop. You have to have sort of an open feedback loop where you're really all the time looking at your perfect program. You think you've designed the perfect secret squirrel program until you look at it 2 weeks later and you're like, oh man, that was terrible, or I'm not getting the results I want out of these athletes, or and we're getting better and more sophisticated. And what we've done is we finally added movement quality into the conversation. It's not just about, can I put another kilo on the bar anymore? So, there is no shortcut to practice, and I think people have forgotten, I used to coach. I'd fly away and coach on the weekends, and then I'd go and stay at the gym. I'd get home at 1:30 in the morning. I'd literally sleep at the gym so I could coach the 6 a.m. class. And there was a lot of practice underneath what you're seeing all the best coaches and athletes do.
I think it's interesting.
Excuse me.
Oh yeah. The point you brought up about learning from other coaches, it's almost like a spiritual or psychedelic experience in a way, where you can all of a sudden, and this is the case in businesses as well, right? If I'm in the fitness industry, I can look at someone in the car industry or the insurance industry, whatever, and we see how they coach, how they do business, and then we can make these new connections that we never had, right? We can that's how a lot of innovation happens.
Yeah, you need to absolutely go out of your field and be curious about processes and principles that apply to you, even though they're in a different field. And also, go be coached. When is the last time you learned a new skill? When's the last time you had beginner's mind? A lot of times coaches are so afraid of looking stupid in front of someone, right? Because they're the head coach, that they can't be coached. Mm-hmm. All the best strength and conditioning coaches I know in the world train with their staff, right? And they all train together, and they're trained publicly, and they don't hide the fact that they have limitations and aren't perfect. And that is really the secret. I mean, sometimes you get this mantle. Suddenly you're the coach, you have your own gym. Like, who's coaching you? Who's watching your sets? Right.
And if they don't see you investing, in a coach, or whether it be time, energy, or money, then how do you expect them to invest time with you, right?
Yeah, and taking feedback on that too, and I think that's a crucial piece, is that you have to be able to be coached and be coachable, and that that humility is also about checking your ego and saying, hey, I know that I'm the boss here, but you can coach me too.
Yep. What is a belief that you have that has recently changed? Like, maybe you grew up eating bread and hot dog buns, and now you think gluten is the devil. What's a recently changed belief?
My wife and I have a breathing practice that has changed for us radically.
How so?
We spend a lot more time thinking about down regulating and turning off and being de-stressed than we did before. Because we were in this time where law school, physical therapy school, babies, business. And all of a sudden, you have no place to go, and you're stressed, and you're burning it down. We sleep, and we try to protect our sleep like it's our job, not like it's our not like we give lip service. Yeah, and then we really try to create situations in our life where we are chilling out, and then there are really simple ways. I think what Laird and Brian McKenzie are doing with XPT. And showing how to use the Wim Hof breathing, mm-hmm. I think that is hugely, hugely important.
What have you noticed? What changes have you noticed since starting to focus more on that?
I can work harder. I'm skinnier. I'm not skinnier. That's a dirty word in our house. I'm leaner. I push more weight. I'm more present with my family. Literally, I sleep better. And I when I work with we have some physician friends, and my blood chemistry is pretty good, but we're always tweaking and turning little knobs, and I think that's what's it. It's the model for being curious.
It's funny. More and more on the last podcast we talked about breath work and mindfulness practice and stuff like that. It's really cool to see this being practiced more mainstream, because it changes every aspect of your life. So that's cool to hear you talk about it.
Well, and what's nice is that it's not, for us, the breathing mechanics has improved my VO2 max. I can ventilate more when I'm training. So right now, I'm a big guy. I try to lift some weights, but my love is this long distance endurance paddling, which means I'm an aerobic athlete. I'm the biggest aerobic athlete on the planet.
Right.
But what ends up happening is I don't get gassed anymore. I only am not strong enough to work hard enough. You know what I mean? Like the breathing has been so important that I don't gas out anymore. I just fatigue out. And what we've seen is we can apply those things to all aspects, and it changes things. So all roads lead to Rome, and when people start to discover the importance of first principles. The problem is that breathing was kind of woo woo. Instead of looking at breathing as a mechanical ventilation efficiency problem or a limiter on my ability to extend my thoracic spine or generate like when I take a breath now to get tight to set up before I deadlift, you should see how much air I can get into my system, which makes me way more stable.
Right. Again, it's not sexy at all. You can't see the changes that it makes, and you have to practice it for yourself to really be sold, right?
Well, what's sexy about 5x5?
Right. Yep. Well, that's why people are doing all these things with bands and chains and unstable surfaces before they learn how to just do a 5x5.
Well, my John Wellborn is a good friend of mine, and he puts people on basic linear progressions forever. And he's like, nope, haven't taken all the slack out yet. And you're like, John, I'm going to die. And he's like, yep, 2 more pounds today. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you can just, I think that, we don't trust simplicity sometimes. And that's the key. Trust simplicity. It always works. Consistency before, heroism.
Yeah, that is truth right there. I love that. A couple more questions for you. Do you have any rules for your girls, such as you're writing books talking about changing lifestyle habits such as standing versus sitting. What rules do you have with your girls, if any, such as like taking the iPad away or making them move a certain amount, anything like that?
Well, what's cool about our daughters is that we make one dinner, they eat it. Our daughters do a pretty good job of eating regular food. We really protect their sleep. We try to walk to school. They're not allowed to sit on the couch. They can sit on the floor. They can cross-legged on the couch. And, we try to put all of this stuff in so that they know that their parents are weirdos, right?
Yeah.
But also, we just make it seem like it's just background noise, and you should hear some of our daughters, talk about food or training, and, we try to front squat with our kids a lot. That's a really big, important thing. We just see that really solves a lot of problems. And, the issue here is that, principles are principles, and lifestyle is sustainable. It's not a gimmick. My oldest daughter's 11. She loves the ice bath. I have a little simple ice bath rig that we do first thing in the morning, or sometimes late in the evening, as far away from training as we can. We don't ice after training. We try to separate it out. But she sleeps better when she ice baths. She knows it. So she jumps in this tub of ice water, and she's there for 20 minutes until she, or not 20 minutes, until 20 breaths,
right,
until she starts to shiver, and then she pops out. So
nice.
What's cool is that our kids are just open to the environment, and it's useful for us that we have aunties and uncles who are around who just happen to be world champions and happen to train, and people come to our house. We call it the Starrett Home Health Center, and
nice.
we have a squat club for kids. Kids squat at our house once a week. Juliet trains all the moms in the neighborhood. They all come and train, lift weights at our house. The dads come over when when our gold medalist friends are over in town. Everyone's training, and it just looks like our kids are going to model that. Everyone they know trains, everyone they know eats food, everyone they know talks about sleep, and and I think that's really the consistency, is that the things that you're doing that are good for you are also good for your kids.
Right. So leading by example rather than just telling them what you know is good and not practicing it yourself.
Yeah, right. It's easy, and I'll tell you, one of the things that we do, I think, is really an important practice is we go around the dinner table at night and we always say, what are the highs and lows? And lows are what would you do over? So we talk about that every day. So there's a little self-reflection on the table. Or we say, hey, what are you grateful for? And it's just a thing. And like people come to our house for the first time and then suddenly they're on the spot. We're like, hey, what are you grateful for? And they're like, oh, God, and my 7-year-old just whips it out. So some of it is just, we see that strength and conditioning. I mean, to be honest, most of us are not, going to be world champion of the world. Training is the things that makes us better and fortifies us as humans in practice. We confront our egos every single day. And, I think setting up those practices really does help our daughters, I think, to be more interesting human beings in the long run.
I fucking love it, man. That's awesome. I want to ask you about the ice baths real quick. I've been taking, freezing cold showers ever since I heard Tony Robbins talk about it a couple years ago, and then Wim Hof comes around. Sell me on the ice bath in the morning versus a shower, and why, and not necessarily why one over the other, but why cold water immersion in the first place.
The reason I got involved with it, is that I got drug into the ice tank, and I'm a very anti-ice position because it really does stop healing. It's not good for you. If you're icing an injury, it's a problem. Right. You're not serious about it healing. And but when I got drugged into the ice, what I realized was that it was resetting my nervous system. That I could, look at heart rate variability and ready to train and desire to train, and I was seeing massive changes in my nervous system recovery. And the cold shower is good, but there's no substitution for a tub of ice water. Right. And so I struggled for a long time to be like, how, I'd go to the store next door and I'd be like buying these ice. It was a pain. So I finally found this little rig that makes it really easy. And I have this little pop-up Japanese bathtub that I got on Amazon. It was like $99, right? It's just like a portable bathtub. It looks like a kiddie pool, but it's like a barrel. So it's just big enough for me to be able to squat. I sit cross-legged in the bottom of it. And then I got a $150 freezer from Amazon, and I make ice blocks in the freezer with like little plastic shoe boxes I got at the Container Store. Okay. And it takes up no space. It needs a 110 plug, which I had outside. It sits on the side of my house. I put a little chlorine in the water, and it makes enough freezer blocks where I can get one ice out of it a day. Wow. And it's really simple. And, if you drop your core temperature before you go to bed, you will sleep better. Yep. How's that? We like to ice in the morning sometimes too, because, if it's hot, we ice in the night because then you just fall asleep because you're cold. Yeah. It's great. But in the morning, it's as far away from the training stimulus as we can get. And it also it literally helps you deal with pain. I think Dr. Is it Danica wrote some really good pieces on, what we think is happening in terms of the cold shock proteins and the epinephrine release. And there's a bunch of interesting physiologic things that happen. But I'll tell you now, the ice water doesn't hurt at all. I just jump in and I stay there until my nervous system can't take it anymore. What does that mean? I start to shiver. The second I start to shiver, I'm out. And if I'm fried and tired, that's like 2 minutes. If I'm doing a good job of managing stress and training volumes and recovery, then I can last 5 minutes in there. It's pretty amazing.
That is awesome, man. Again, anecdotally, for me, it wakes me up more than a cup of coffee can. I have higher energy all day. Totally. There's a growing amount of research on the benefits of this stuff. So I encourage
brown fat. It's all about the brown fat, baby.
Yeah, exactly. My last question for you. What is a belief that, and I know you live in the land of the weird in San Francisco. So this, I'm sure, I'm not sure how this question will go, but what is a belief that you hold that those around you still think is crazy, right? Something you think that everybody else thinks you're crazy for thinking.
I'm in the battle professionally with physical therapists. Not all physical therapists. There are definitely some kick-ass physical therapists where we're going to have to shift. That I think that people are way smarter than we give them credit for and can start to fix their own problems. Mm-hmm. That has been a theme that the for-profit medicine world does not like it when Christoph and I are like, hey, here's how you're going to, clear this up. When Donnie Thompson is like, no, you can address your own dysfunction here. When, Gray Cook is like, hey, you should be able to fix that, But I'll tell you, we're pretty open. We have this model that things that we think are valid are observable, measurable, and repeatable. That's an old mantra from CrossFit. That's the heart of the scientific method. And our model is test, retest, and share. And we have always been just pretty felt strongly about that, we're open to changing our position if you can show us a better way. And, the main thing is that, maybe we're totally hippies. We live up in north of the city of Marin. I mean, we make our own kombucha, and because it was too expensive to buy that $5 kombucha. And, but I feel like I have found a group of strength and conditioning coaches and thinkers and exercise physiologists, and everyone is on a mission to really take all the low-hanging fruit off the tree and take all the slack out of the system. And we're pretty open. We don't do a bunch of woo-woo stuff. I mean, it really is, you need to prove to us it works, and that's how we'll see it. But we're really starting to see best practices emerge that are really helping people achieve more physically and mentally than they ever thought they could. So I don't know. I don't think I have any one belief that's, except that, man, I think we're capable of a lot more than we're giving ourselves credit for.
Right. And yeah, starting with the daily practice of the Mobility WOD, you've definitely started to change the world in that way where, people can help themselves. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the strength and conditioning coaches and the fitness coaches out there who understand, how to employ it. We try not to give, hard and fast, this is the recipe you have to follow, because we understand that people are going to be able to integrate it because they're smarter than we know, and I think the time was right to, what we're seeing is that, we hadn't moved the needle on injury rates and, ACLs and any of these other things. And, I think we're going to, the next generation, we're going to see massive, massive changes in performance and output.
I hope so, man. Where can people find out more about you and what you've got going on?
We are, our handle is at MobilityWOD, and that's WOD, workout of the day, MobilityWOD. And we're on Twitter, and, where we just launched our, we've been teaching a course for the last 7 or 8 years, about our system. It's an introductory course, and we've run about 15,000 coaches and athletes through it since we started.
Wow.
And we had a queue of about 800 requests to come teach all over the planet, and we just were never going to get there and sort of deliver as much information as we wanted in a single day course. And so we just last week put the course online, and I'm really proud of this course. It is about 12 hours of video content. It's like 86 lectures.
Wow.
I really try, things that we have pulled out of the course, or, it's probably twice the information people get. And then this allows them to study at home and spin up to sort of basic understanding. So I think I'm really, really proud of this thing. Our whole staff worked on it for about 6 months, and I think it's really good. And then we're working on our level 2 course right now, because we're really going to try to make what we're calling MWOD coaches. Mm-hmm. This coach who can do some manual assessment, and if someone comes in with a hot elbow, you should be able to go talk to your coach, and they should be able to apply some prescriptions to be able to fix it. And we're trying to do that. That's the only way we're going to change the sports medicine model. So, if you're interested in anything we're talking about, check out the course online, and then be ready for this level 2, because we're going to blow minds with it.
That's awesome. Would you recommend people that have already attended your CrossFit Mobility course still check out the online version?
Yeah, I would, and we're trying to work out a discount so you can get it like basically half off, mm-hmm. because there's so much more information there that you haven't seen or heard before. And really, like, one of our friends took it, and he's like, hey, I took the other course, and I was like, go through this course and just let me know, and if you're not happy, I'll give you your money back. And he was like, holy shit.
Nice.
Nice.
And
that was really the intention. The intention is really, it should take someone a couple of weeks to work through this. And we really tried to just over deliver, because we understand that that's what people need now. People are so much more sophisticated.
Right.
When we started this thing, all these years ago, I'd say, hey, this is your leg. And people were like, this is amazing. I have a leg. Thank you so much. I PR'd on my deadlift.
Yeah.
And, now, we've gotten a lot more sophisticated, and that means we can up the game a little bit. And that's what we've tried to do.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate it. This was phenomenal.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much, man.
All right, brother. Take care.